It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Every Tuesday on the Happy Families Podcast, I answer your questions about how to make your relationships better, how to help your family to flourish, how to make your family happier. Hello, my name's Dr. Justin Coulson. If you would like to submit a question, happyfamilies.com.au. Just scroll down till you get to the podcast section, click on the record button and leave us your message. I answer your questions every Tuesday on the pod. Easy to use. Just make sure you know what you're going to say before you start talking. happyfamilies.com.au. Push the record button and ask your questions about making your family happier. Today on the podcast, kids who are perfect model students at school and turn into hashtag demon child at home. Up first, though, a question about sneaky teens with tech.
Hi, Justin and Kylie. This is Christina from the U.S. I was hoping you might be able to share tips on bedtimes and ending screen time for older kids. We allow our 13-year-old son to stay up till midnight on non-school nights, but it's never enough. We tried locking apps on the phone, turning off the Wi-Fi, etc., but he keeps sneaking around, finding ways to get back up and get back on. We've worked with him with the 3 E's, started with the most freedom and trust, but have had to be more and more restrictive because he just won't follow our family expectations. He says our rules are arbitrary and pointless, and to be honest, I need to go to bed, so I can't stay up all night to make sure he is where he needs to be. Can you please help with how to enforce bedtimes with teens?
Christina, I hear this and I just literally kind of go, oh, it's so frustrating. A couple of things on this. Number one, the United States seems to have a different culture around adolescence and bedtime than does Australia. I think for the most part, my family is not the only one that does this. Australia has more of an early to bed, early to rise kind of mentality. I know teenagers stay up a bit later, but in the US, my kids have a bunch of friends who are there. They've met them on camps that we've taken them to over the years. And it's not unusual for our kids to be messaging their United States friends and getting replies at 2 a.m. US time. Our kids don't have their phones in their bedroom. They don't have that facility, but their United States friends are on their devices at all hours, and it stuns me consistently. So you're working against inertia here in that you've got a culture where all of your son's friends are allowed to do it, and he just doesn't see what the point is. The majority of teenagers, particularly in the United States, but also in Australia, bring some kind of technology into the bedroom, which adds the enormous amount, the excessive amount of screen time that they get each day, and it affects a whole range of different areas in their lives. Experts are becoming increasingly concerned about the effects of the blue light from these electronic devices on the sleep-wake cycle. An estimated 2 in 3 teenagers regularly sleep less than the recommended amount, and screen time is almost certain to be responsible for sleep deprivation and other problems. In a recent literature review of studies investigating the link between youth screen media use and sleep, 90% of included studies found an association between screen media use and delayed bedtime and or decreased total sleep time. Proposed mechanisms include displacement of time that would have been spent sleeping, psychological stimulation and light exposure, and increased physiological alertness. This pervasive phenomenon, according to researchers of sleep loss, has widespread implications due to the associations between insufficient sleep, an increased risk of childhood obesity, disrupted psychological well-being, and impaired cognitive academic function. The research is there. The evidence is clear. You try and have that conversation with your 13-year-old son, and he doesn't care. He doesn't. It's not important to him. He wants to be with his friends. He wants to be hanging out, doing his own thing. You don't get it, Mum. And no matter what you say, from his perspective, he doesn't have the insight to realize that he's wrong. And the more you try to convince him that he is wrong, the harder he'll push back and the more convinced he'll be that he is right. Force creates resistance. So what do? Just before I share some ideas, I just remembered a friend of mine used to go and collect all of his kids' devices around about 8:45, 9 p.m. And he was like, you guys can stay up and read, you can do homework, you can do whatever, but no more devices after 9 o'clock. He put them into a box, kept it by his bedside. He woke up one morning, 2 a.m. His son was commando crawling in the dark across the carpet so that he could get into his box, so that he could get his laptop out and his devices out so that he could play games with his friends 2 a.m. This is standard. And unfortunately, the harder you push, the more you rupture the relationship. It's one of those impossible situations. All right, let's have a look at this. Christina, you've said you've tried the 3 E's, hasn't worked. You know what? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can sit down and explore all you like, explain all you want, and when you empower your kids, they say, well, I want to do what I want, and you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like banging your head against a brick wall. Sometimes the 3 E's just don't work. Did a podcast about that a little while ago. It might be worth having a quick listen to that one so that you can find out what to do when the 3 E's don't work. I still stand by this. They are your best bet. It's just that it's a long-term effort. An alternative could be that you go in completely the opposite direction and have a no limits, free-for-all approach where you just say, mate, no more rules around this. You go to bed when you want. You can be on screen when you want, but there are a handful of behavioural expectations. You must be up at this time every day. This is how we expect school to go. This is what we anticipate in terms of relationships in the home, the way you treat us, the way you treat your siblings. That's so long as you can convince us that you can make this work and it can function, we'll take the pressure off. Now, I can't see this working. I really cannot, because if he stays up until 2 or 3, he's not getting up at 6 or 7 the next morning so he can be on the ball and do the stuff he needs to do. But that is something that I have recommended to some parents from time to time, and very, very, very infrequently they'll say, hey, it worked. More often than not even close. But sometimes you kind of just, where do you go? Again, I stand by the 3 E's as being your best bet. Third suggestion is that you just stay on it. Why? Because in real life, nobody has a one and done conversation about screens and bedtime with their teenagers. This is an ongoing cycle. It's an ongoing drama. It's just not something that there is a quick fix for. I wish that I was wrong. I wish that there was a way through it. But to me, the only way through it is to take the devices away. Literally take the devices away and they don't have access to them at all. Full stop, end of story. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but that's kind of it. So let me wrap up by saying this. Until legislation changes, this is going to be one of those things that falls on the shoulders of parents. It shouldn't be. There's now been, in the United States, which is where all the laws are made because this is where all the companies are based and therefore they have to follow US law. In the United States, over the last 20 years or thereabouts, there have been 40 congressional hearings where the CEOs of the tech companies have come in and been asked to account for what they're doing to protect children and to support families. They've made up a whole lot of stuff, and their lying, mendacious, duplicitous CEOs have literally continued to white ant your authority and your children's well-being so that they can increase their market capitalization and the share price of their organizations. It's criminal what they're doing. It's absolutely appalling. I really fundamentally believe that these CEOs are responsible for more suffering and more misery and more mental health challenges in our young people than anybody else in the history of humanity. I just don't know what you can do. It's pretty much on you, and you've got to keep at it. And I really still think the 3 is your best bet. Jocelyn Brewer is an Australian tech and parenting or tech psychology expert. She's got this idea of digital nutrition. You can Google Jocelyn Brewer digital nutrition and you'll find these 3 M's. She says, help your kids to use their tech mindfully, meaningfully, and moderately. Again, that kind of fits really neatly with my 3 E's. If you can have a conversation where you're discussing that, I think that's going to be your best bet. But Christina, it's almost a no-win situation. It's something that you're going to have conversations about ongoingly. Good luck. Question number 2 from Kate.
It's the end of the school year where I am, and my 5-year-old got a glowing school report, both with regards to her schoolwork and her teacher said she's really polite and helpful. They actually called her a model student. I'm grateful and confused. At home, if I ask her to take her plate to the kitchen, she collapses into a heap in tears, screaming at me that it's not fair. I understand that it's normal for kids to be more well-behaved with other people outside of their home, but I'm worried she's learned that we need to be perfect all the time for other people, and at home we can behave dreadfully. How do I help her achieve a more balanced way of seeing? Thanks so much for your insight.
Kate, this is a real tricky one, isn't it? We have these different environments, and our children behave one way somewhere and another way another place. We find this really disconcerting. The reality is it's pretty normal, and a lot of parents struggle with it. You're probably aware of that. I just want to talk about why. Why is it that your children feel like they have to be perfect for other people, but they can completely let it go when they're at home? Let's look at the school environment. It's a very different place to the home environment. First of all, there's the social pull. Like, you look at what all the other kids are doing and you kind of just fall in line. As humans, we're ultra social and we are very heavily influenced by what happens around us. So there's just that happening in and of itself. Beyond that, though, there's a lot more punishments and rewards. There's a lot of structure in a school environment. Children understand the structure. The structure is pretty consistent and they know what they need to do most of the time. Teachers don't have biological ties, whereas you do. And so there's a difference in the relationship, which probably allows those punishments and rewards to occur. I mean, I would say that there's a conditionality versus an unconditionality. And that's not to throw any shade at teachers. They're not related to your kids and they're not supposed to treat them the same way that a parent would. But the unconditionality that children know that they have at home definitely changes their behavior there. The fourth thing that I would say is this: kids often find school to be a stressful environment because there is that social aspect, the behavioral aspect. They mask or they camouflage or they suppress, especially if they're neurodivergent. And so that's definitely going to change their behavior when they come home. They've been really pushing hard to hold it together all day. They get home and they feel like they can finally take the mask off. They can finally get out of the camouflage and just be themselves. The suppression no longer has to hold true. Now, obviously, being well socialized requires that you do fit in and that you do suppress. But when they get home, it certainly feels a lot more relaxing for them to be able to let it go a little bit. And they feel safe at home. That's the fifth thing. They feel safe at home in a way that they can't in any other environment. Besides that, the sixth thing that I'll highlight is that I mean, I want to say this really gently because I know teachers are busy and the demands on teachers are enormous. But teachers fundamentally in front of the classroom are teaching. That's what their job is. And they're looking after the classroom. They're managing things in the classroom and they're focused on working with the kids to get a certain task done. Whereas at home, there's usually a whole lot of other stuff going on. We're busy. Our focus is in the kitchen and also trying to get the ironing done and racing out to hang out a load of washing while the pasta's boiling on the stove, and we're trying to get the kids to do one or two things at the same time. And so there's a diluted or a different focus. That may be a little unfair to teachers, but I think that most people would get where I'm coming from there. So what do we do about this? How do we help our child to hold it together in productive and adaptive ways at home, since clearly they can do it when they are at school? I'm going to share just 3 ideas. Number one, allow them time to decompress when they get home. So often, because our lives are so busy, we bring them home and it is on from the gun. Like, we walk in the door and they've got to get changed. They've got to drop their bag. They've got to get ready for their extracurricular activities. We've got to get the house in order. We've got to organize meals. There's stuff to do and there's multiple children going in different directions. So I would try to find a way that there can be some margin. When I talk about margin, what I'm describing is, you know, if you've ever had to print something and you're trying to get it onto one page and you have to keep on pushing those margins out, and now you've got this white A4 sheet and the text goes from one side to the other and from the very top to the very bottom, and reading doesn't feel nice. When there's no margin, it feels overwhelming. There's too much on the page. You need the margin to make the experience nice as you read. And it's the same with life. We need a little bit of margin so we can breathe, so that we're not overwhelmed. As part of that decompression, as part of that margin, I would recommend food. That would be, I guess, the extension of my idea of decompressing and creating margin. When kids come home, they're often depleted. Sometimes they haven't eaten particularly well. Often they've thrown their lunch in the bin. You just don't know about it. And so by making sure that they have some good food, they can restock on their glucose supply and they can kind of become human again. Second thing that I would recommend is this: involvement. Often we send our children in one direction while we go in another direction because there's so much to do. There's something really profound about saying, hey, why don't we do this together? Or would you come and help me and then I'll come and help you? Just being involved, not even making it about chores, but just part of the routine is we're doing this or we're doing that. And being involved, it can take the pressure off and it can build the relationship. And it also facilitates the third idea that I've got, and that is allow time for fun. F-U-N, fun. Play is the work of childhood, and we keep on cramming childhood full of all this other stuff, so there isn't enough time for play. So I would really recommend just facilitating unstructured playtime where your child is not on a screen, but it's instead outside and being active and playing with friends in unstructured activities. It'll make such a difference, and you'll find that behavior will improve when those things happen. I guess one other thing that I'd highlight is just maturity, right? I mean, we're talking about a little kiddo here who, as they grow up, they will get it together and things will work out much nicer. Play and involvement and fun and food and decompression time are going to be absolutely essential. Kate, I really hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you some answers and some things to think about. If you would like to submit your questions, I love answering them every Tuesday on the pod. Just go to happyfamilies.com.au, use the easy to use button, just click it and start talking. Send your message through and we'll answer it on the podcast. happyfamilies.com.au. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. More information about making your family happier is available at happyfamilies.com.au.